Interventions aimed at optimizing human performance often show promising effects in the lab, but relatively smaller effects in more realistic settings. There are multiple potential culprits for the diminished effects, including greater heterogeneity in participants and increased complexity and variability in the tasks. In the current project, we sought to better understand how the constellation of such participant and task-level contextual features can be integrated into a causal model of a data generation process for a geopolitical forecasting task. The aim was to be able to generate reasonably accurate predictions of a given participant's performance in an experimental condition. Interventions. The data we will discuss were drawn from a recent IARPA hybrid forecasting competition that examined the benefits of including different software tools to aid geopolitical forecasting. Participants selected individual forecasting problems, or IFPs, for which they would enter a probabilistic forecast for the likelihood of a geopolitical event occurring. For the example shown in the top right, participants were given a set of possible value ranges and asked to judge the relative probability of their occurrence, with the total likelihood summing to 100%. The main dependent variable for the task was forecast accuracy, measured by Breyer score. The main independent variable was whether the participants had access to the software tool's prescience or not. In developing the models for the task, we used contextual features of the data, such as what forecasting problems the participants selected, their forecasting behavior, for example, the number of updates they provided, their self-reported knowledge about the problem, and natural language rationales for the forecast. We also had data on multiple cognitive, demographic, and psychological variables. On the left, we inferred a given participant's knowledge of an out-of-sample IFP by weighing performance on in-sample IFPs by their semantic similarity to the out-of-sample IFP. The semantic features for an IFP included the IFP question and descriptive text, as well as the rationales provided by participants. The inferred task knowledge, or ITK metric, presumes performance on an out-of-sample IFP will likely resemble performance on similar IFPs that the participant completed. ITK was modestly associated with performance on out-of-sample IFPs. On the right, we developed a metric for predicting performance for an out-of-sample participant based on the performance of their most similar in-sample participants. Inferred knowledge similarity, or IKS, is based on two participants' choices of similar or different tasks and their accuracy on those tasks. The out-of-sample participants were matched with in-sample participants based on IKS, text similarities between their rationales, and numeric similarities between their psychometric features. The in-sample participants' performance was found to be modestly predictive of performance on the out-of-sample participants. The subject matching approach provided a useful basis for getting started, but such approaches are limited by the lack of knowledge about the causal relationships within the data. We employed structural equation modeling to specify and test causal models of the data generation process. A SEM model for one of the geopolitical datasets is shown here. The outcome variable is forecasting accuracy. The experimental intervention variable is called hybrid and measures the frequency of using various forecasting tools when they are available. The variable motivation, measured by the number of forecast updates, mediates the effect of treatment on the outcome. Another latent variable, psychological traits, is hypothesized to determine accuracy and is measured by cognitive reflection, numeracy, and extroversion. This model was fit to the data and then used for counterfactual reasoning, defined as changing the values of certain observables of interest, that is, making hypothetical interventions, and using the SEM estimates of the latent variables and path coefficients to compute expected outcome values. The figure on the left shows an example of a counterfactual prediction for a participant. As a hypothetical intervention, the participant use of hybrid features is increased. Then the model is used to answer the question, what would have been this participant's forecasting accuracy if she or he had made use of the hybrid forecasting tools more frequently? The double arrows between psychological traits and hybrid is removed because this is an intervention and thus correlations cannot be assumed. The other path coefficients are retained and used to compute new values for the latent variables, hybrid, and motivation, which in turn determine the new value of accuracy. As can be seen in this example, a radical intervention produced a relatively small effect on the outcome, reflecting the weak effect of the intervention. This can be confirmed by looking at the overall results summarized in the graph on the right. Two counterfactual predictions were generated for the entire sample of participants. In the upward counterfactual condition, participants were assumed to have the same psychological traits as the real participants and use hybrid forecasting tools frequently. In the downward counterfactual condition, participants were assumed to have the same psychological traits as the real participants and use hybrid forecasting tools infrequently. Based on counterfactual reasoning, we can conclude that if participants made greater use of the hybrid forecasting tools, their accuracy would have improved significantly. However, since the effect size is small, the treatment would have had a small effect on the outcome, even under the assumption that all participants would have used the provided tools frequently. Counterfactual reasoning based on SEM can be used to extend the range of conclusions that can be drawn from human performance optimization experiments. However, SEM requires substantial background knowledge for model development and counterfactual reasoning. Current work is aimed at using ontologies, knowledge graphs, and concept induction to supplement the necessary contextual knowledge.